Hello and welcome to the Mersey Sport Live podcast this week. Today I'm joined by Tom Routley and Ryan. How have you been?
Yeah,
not
good,
bad.
thank you.
All good, thank you.
And we've got a special guest in the studio today, Matt Crehan. He's a runner, he's from St Helens and he's been in Barcelona this weekend. So how are you, Matt?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I think I brought the sunny weather back with me as well, to be fair.
And so what were you doing there? So you're a long distance runner. We've sort of found out about you when you won the Liverpool Marathon and the Manchester Marathon last year.
Yeah.
What was the event this weekend?
So it was the Granola's half marathon, the 34th running of it. So England have always sent out a team to do it. And yeah, it was my first England best sort of call up and debut running for England, which was really sort of great experience. I'm proud to represent the country and things like that. It was a tough course though, so a bit sore this morning.
And how did you finish that in the event?
To be fair, I'm not 100%. Like the results still aren't published yet, so I'm waiting on them. I think I made the top 10. I was third counter for the team, yeah, I think that time was a bit poor, to be fair. My time, I was a little disappointed with the actual timing of it. But yeah, it was 6.5 miles uphill and 6.5 miles back down the hill. So it was a bit of a challenging course, and having 2 days out there where it was perfect weather conditions, it wasn't too hot or anything like that. The sun seemed to come out for us yesterday, and it was quite warm temperatures by the end of the run. But I got a sprint finish in and took an extra place on the line, which is always a nice thing to do.
So obviously Sam touched on you winning the Liverpool Marathon, but you've also competed in the Croxteth Parkrun twice and won it back to back. So I was just wondering, with you being from Merseyside and running in the area, do you feel that you've seen an uptake in kind of running in the local area, especially with young people and people getting into the sport?
Yeah, so I started doing parkrun back in 2011, and it was still quite a new thing back then. I was at Leeds Uni, and the university had sort of worked with parkrun. Tom Williams, who's now CEO of Parkrun UK, he was a lecturer at the university, so he brought it. Leeds was the first one outside of London, and so we were actually the only four, and have been the only four paid run directors ever for parkrun, because the university paid us. It was something that they worked out, and so yeah, that was my first sort of getting involved with parkrun. I was injured at the time. I got injured when I went to uni, and basically packed in running really. So that was my way of sort of staying in touch with the sport and just being there and seeing it. And I thought parkrun was great from that grassroots level of getting people out, and people loving it, and the community sort of spirit it built. And then yeah, obviously when I came back from uni, I helped set up St Helens Parkrun. So I did that pretty much every weekend and things. And now, my girlfriend lives in just literally opposite Croxteth Park, so I'm found at Croxteth Park most Saturdays now, running with her. But I build it into sessions and stuff. So yeah, when I was doing build up for Manchester and Liverpool Marathon, Liverpool was an unplanned marathon, but I'm sure we'll get onto that maybe. It was build up for Manchester. A lot of my runs were sort of 18 miles at a steady pace, and then run hard for 3 miles finish. So I'd go out early and time it to get back to the parkrun start for the 3 miles, and then I'd be hammering the 3 miles as hard as I could. And my mate David Devine, who I run with, who's a Paralympic athlete, bronze medalist in London back in 2012, and European champion over 1500 metres Paralympian, and he's the course record holder. So I keep trying to chase that down, and annoyingly I missed it by 3 seconds, his record. I'd done 16 miles already and missed it by 3 seconds because I went the wrong way. There's a point on the course where you sort of run past a turn which you can't go down, and then the next left is where you would go. And I ran towards that one and then realised and said, oh no, it was the other one, and turned around and went back, and I went, no, it is that one, and went back, and then missed it by 3 seconds. But David run in Tokyo that night, so and he'd finished fourth, and I know he was disappointed with that, so I thought I couldn't take the record off him that day anyway.
And sort of staying on that sort of subject of athletics and its interest, I don't know if you can speak for athletics as a whole, but you see lots of people say running around Sefton Park, running around the parks around here, but interest in elite athletics seems to be in the decline a bit. Is that do you think that's maybe the Usain Bolt factor, or what's your opinion on that?
I think it's the I think it's that like elite athletics doesn't help itself, to be fair. Yeah, I mean, like park run, that sort of culture and that community that it's grown and things like that has boomed, that grassroots and people getting out and active, and obviously the pandemic, to be fair, everyone was told you can go out for an hour and exercise. Well, what could you do in an hour that was, they didn't involve too much, having to go and buy a bike, which no one could get hold of because they'd all gone and things like that. And running was the easy thing, I mean, obviously I own a running shop, so ideally I would like people to run in proper running shoes, and people weren't doing, but then they all came to the running shop once we were allowed to reopen and bought proper running shoes and things. But yeah, people got out, and you get out and run, you wear whatever shoes and just get out and be active. So that sort of obviously again increased, and people who'd gone to the gym and then suddenly were outside, and obviously we had, even though it's a pandemic, we had a really nice April and May and things like that with the sun blazing. So people realised just how nice it was to get out in the local area and just go for a run and explore places they'd never even gone to, even though they'd lived there for 20 years or so. And so that really did really, really well and got people out being active. But yeah, from the elite side, like, it's the personalities, and I think it's difficult. You get like at the Olympics and things like that, like unless you feel like people like to follow a story, and unless you've built that story, and you don't get that very often. Like Kipchoge, people know Kipchoge because there's a story there. He's been on the scene for forever, what it feels like. And then obviously with the whole Nike's Breaking 2 project and the sub 2 hour attempt and things like that, it created that story and that idea behind him, and then his message of that no humans limited and things like that, and everything, that real story that people got behind. And the same was with Usain Bolt, that obviously his race was like 9 seconds, but it created that sort of power and that story behind it, and this fun-loving sort of guy where he was energetic on the start line. Where a lot of times sprinters are really serious, and you can't read them at all, and he making jokes and having a laugh and things like that. And then obviously Mo Farah with the Mobot sort of thing and all that sort of stuff. And again, from a British standpoint, that sort of story that he created as well. And, being a Somalian refugee and coming over and things, and that whole story, it's something that people can get behind and understand and follow. But a lot of elite athletes either don't tell the story, or it just doesn't get pulled across in from the commentators and things like that when they're racing and stuff. And some of that's how it's broadcast as well. Like the 5,000 and 10,000 meters, I always think are fantastically interesting races to watch. But the way they're shown is obviously we cut across to like field events and stuff. And again, that's a shame on the field events that they have to be just cut into in the middle of races and things like that, because there's a great story going on in there. But you just see like, oh, this was the best jump done and that was the best throw done and stuff. And it's like, oh, that's great, but it doesn't build any sort of understanding or momentum in what was going on in that event. And that's where you lose the story as well in like the 5 and 10, which are some of my favourite races to watch, or the marathon, because you're cutting away from it at times where you sort of like moves get made. Especially at championships like the Olympics or the World Champs, it becomes tactical, and people are thinking of I'll put a little bit of a burst in here and try and make a gap and things. And if you cut away, you sort of miss that might happen in that cutaway and things. So it makes it difficult to follow for just the general public who don't understand athletics. Maybe it makes it difficult to follow for those that do understand athletics and are watching it. And we get frustrated watching it, thinking, well, you've just missed the most important moment. I mean, the British Trials Marathon was a perfect example of it, because you had obviously you had Callum Hawkins and Jake Smith pacing, and then you had Ben Connor, who already had the qualifying standard and just needed to run a tactical race and finish in the top 2. You had Dewey Griffiths and Moedin running, and then you'd had Chris Thompson, who was dropped. And Chris was just had a new child that week. He was 39, he was going to be 40 in a couple of weeks' time. And it went to the women's race, where we had the winner she was miles ahead. She broke away from the field, and it was great to see. But the more interesting race for the women's race was 2nd and 3rd place, and were they going to run the standard, and who was going to get that 2nd spot if they did run the standard. And then so we were just watching the lead woman, and then we cut back to the men's race, and suddenly Chris Thompson was in front, and you were like, well, where's Chris come from? And even the commentators didn't know. They were like, oh, are they lapping him? Which was impossible, because he'd never got that far behind them. And he'd come through and caught the guys back up, and he's taken the lead, and then he was surging past, because he knows when you go past someone, you've got to carry on that momentum, because it rattles the runners that you're passing, sort of thing. And then obviously Chris went on to win it. Ran the qualifying standard for Tokyo, and the shots of him qualifying and things that were all over the newspapers and things, because there was a story, just had a new child, he was turning 40 soon. It created that atmosphere and that story to it. And I think that's where elite athletics needs to help itself out a little bit. And in this day and age, that's where the pressure is put a little bit on the athletes as well, to create that sort of social media sort of package and story behind it and grow that. And, there's certain athletes, Galen Rupp in America is their best marathon runner, but he has no social media presence whatsoever. But people know about him because he is such a good runner out there, and there's ties to controversial with his coach and things like that as well, which sort of gets him in the media and coverage and stuff also. But yeah, there's for a lot of athletes and things, I think you do have to have that little bit of social media presence now, and just craft that story of who you are and what you're doing and things, so that when you do come to a race and stuff, and it is televised, people know about you, and they can go, oh yeah, that's them, and they want to watch you run and compete, whether you have a good day or a bad day.
It's a very good answer, that.
Yeah. So, like I said, just having represented England, you must be at a personal kind of high, I would say, in your fitness, would you say?
Yeah, well, I'm struggling with a little injury at the moment, which didn't help on the course yesterday, because it was, as I say, really hilly, and it's a knee injury that I've managed sort of to pick up, and it's just been in the background. But when it came to trying to run up hills and run down hills, a knee problem is always one of the ones you don't want to be having at that point. Yeah. But I got through, and there was no way I was ever dropping out. I was going to crawl that way in my England best and finish if I had to. But yeah, like I say, I think I finished just about in the top 10 there, so it wasn't too bad of a run. And the rest of the team, the guys were all about 3 minutes behind their personal bests, so I think going off the course, it was reasonable. Though the girls all had a fantastic run, and we had one girl made the podium in third place, and then fourth and fifth as well, which there was prizes for the top 5, so that was really good. But yeah, I mean, other than the knee injury, I'm feeling fit. Coming off the back of Manchester and Liverpool, felt really good. I went out to the Caribbean to do a race, and sort of luckily, I think it was cancelled when I got there. Like, I got there, arrived, and there was protests over COVID on the island, so they cancelled the race. I'd gone and taken my girlfriend with me, so spoke to my coach, and he said just enjoy the end of season. So we just lay on the beach and drank beer for a week or so, which was a nice end of season break. And then came back and had to start training for my next marathon, which is it was going to be Seville on the 20th of Feb, so 2 weeks time. But my build-up's been shaken with this knee injury, so we're just going to focus on Manchester now. I'm still going to go to Seville, and we're just going to use it as a training session, run about 15 miles at our target marathon pace, and just get that practice in. Obviously, we've said if I'm feeling really good at 15 miles and we're on pace, maybe we'll carry on. But the main goal is Manchester in April. That's the trials for the Commonwealth Games and the European Champs. And there's looking like a good field there. Johnny Mellor, who's from the Wirral and runs for Liverpool, is going to be there, and I would say he's probably the favourite. So my time from Manchester last year is going to be wiped off the record books, I think. It'd be great to be in that race with Johnny and things, and he knows how to run them as well. So hopefully I can come away with a good time, and maybe grab that Commonwealth or European qualifying standard as well, which would be nice.
And I think Louis going to go on to ask about sort of how you got into running, but firstly, you mentioned the not preparing for the Liverpool Marathon as such, although I'm sure you're training all the time. Faye Hughes, the winner of the women's marathon, was exactly the same, just decided on the morning to go and do it. How does that fit in with your training regime? Yeah,
so I mean, Manchester was 2 weeks before. So I trained solidly for Manchester. We knew I was in great shape. We knew we were going to go for a good time. And I mean, 218, I was happy enough with 218. I was solo from 10k, so it got to a point where I finished with lots of energy left in me and thinking, I could have maybe gone faster, but I didn't have that race sort of push, and having fallen apart in my only other marathon prior to that, back in April. From sort of 15 miles in, when I got to that point, I got to the halfway point, and I was a minute faster than I'd been in that race. I started to panic a little bit in that, I was running sub 2:13 pace at that point through halfway, and it was like, well, you know, I fell apart and I don't know where anyone else is, and I knew I was getting a little bit of stick because I'd gone off at a stupid fast pace. You know, the first 5k was sub 2:10 pace, so it was a little bit of madness. But I'm well known for doing that in races, so I knew I was going to get some stick for it. But I thought, well, I've just got to win this, and I don't know where anyone is behind me. Let's just back off a little bit. Let's be a little bit more reserved. We're still, you know, the aim was to try and get under 2:17. I think I backed off a little bit too much in the end. But yeah, so I was happy enough with 2:18, but still a little disappointed with it. And then, I went away camping for the week after that with my girlfriend. Nice, my legs felt good and stuff. So when I came back the following week, I did a bit of running, and my girlfriend was doing the half marathon in Liverpool. That was always on the plan. She was always going to do that. I was just going to go and support. And as the week went by, I thought, well, actually, I feel really good. And owning a running shop in Merseyside in St Helens, I was like, I couldn't buy better marketing than to go and run Liverpool and win it, and wear like the shop vest and stuff like that, and just like basically be a running billboard sort of thing. And so I had to convince my mum first, because she was a marathon runner as well. Well, she was a 10,000 metre runner, but she ran in the Olympics in the marathon. And so I had to convince her first that this was a good idea. And you know, she understood it from the business standpoint because she's my business partner with the shop, so she got it. She thought I was mad, but she got it. And then I had to convince my coach to okay it as well, and he thought I was, because he's an elite athlete himself. He's just run 61 minutes for a half marathon and broke the Canadian record out in Houston. Nice flat course there. So I had to convince him, and once I sort of brought up the business saying, well, you know, with him being an elite athlete, I said, well, you know, if a sponsor told you, you know, look, we want you to go and run this race because it's our big event, and you know, we're putting all the money into it, stuff like that, and go and do it, then you know, you'd have to go and do it even if it didn't really fit your plan. And I was saying, you know, the thing with Liverpool was that no one had run under 2:30 to win it before, and I thought, well, I should be able to do that without doing too much damage to myself. So the plan was to go easy into it. But again, as I say, my reputation is to go off hard, and yeah, the first mile was a 4:50, so you know, daft pace again. It was a lot harder than Manchester because of the fact that the water stations were paper cups rather than plastic bottles, and every time I grabbed one I just crushed it, so I didn't get any water. And about probably 17 miles in, just started to cramp up like mad. And at 23 miles I had to stop and actually stretch my hamstring off because I'd cramped up that bad, I just couldn't run on it. But I knew at 20 miles you do a U-turn at Penny Lane. So I'd clocked on my watch what time it was, and then I clocked when I saw the next runner. So I knew I had a 5-minute lead over him at 20 miles. I thought, well, I should be able to hold that for the last 6. I mean, he was obviously running really well because he closed me down to 2 minutes by the end. So he was gaining on me. But yeah, luckily, you know, it ended at 26.2, and I could still take the win.
Yeah.
But and I think that there's no. I've got a nice poster up of me winning Manchester in the shop now. I haven't got one of Liverpool because literally I'm saying the F word as I cross the finish line because my legs cramped up that bad sort of thing. So the photos aren't as good, but you know.
So for most kids, kind of long distance running is something you do as a kid, like you do kind of cross country at school or whatever, but then not many take the next step. Obviously you mentioned whilst at university you were involved in parkrun. Where do you see kind of that point in your career where you said, I'm going to take the next step, and how did you come to that?
So it was 25 to be fair when I got back running again. I packed in when I went to uni. I might have run, you know, once every couple of weeks or something like that, just a little run out and maybe did a park run or something. But it was more just sort of I stayed involved in the sport through being at park run. I did a podcast interviewing like Olympic medalists and things like that while I was at uni and stuff. So that was just how I kept in touch with the sport really. But yeah, I sort of at 25 I got married at 21, and my wife left me at when I was 24, and so I sort of went, well, I either be down and depressed about this, or I turn back to the thing that I loved doing, which was running. And so that's where I thought, you know, my mum was 32 when she went to the Olympics. I've got time. Let's give it a go and see how close I can get to doing the same thing. I got back into it, and then jumped up to sort of 100-mile weeks by sort of 6 months into training and things like that. Picked up little niggles because it was probably too much too early and things like that. And when I came back, I wanted to be a sub-4 miler. I was like, I'm going to break for sub-4 for the mile, do that, and then realised I just didn't really have that speed in my legs. So then it was like, okay, let's focus on the 5 and the 10. and by 30 I'll do a marathon. And then I'd been trying to do a marathon since I was 27, to be fair, because my coach then turned around at one point and said, "Oh, I thought you might do one of this, do one round now." And then it just got in my head, and I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, maybe we'll do one." But I got injured. I was meant to do one in 2018. I was meant to do the Chester Marathon, sorry. And I went over on my ankle 3 weeks out, just after having done the Warrington Half, just doing a training session. We were on Shirley Park, and I stepped on a fallen tree branch and rolled my ankle and did 3 ligaments. So that I forgot about the marathon and went back to doing 5 and 10Ks then once I was healed up from that. And then I was meant to do London in 2020 before the pandemic, and then obviously it got cancelled, so then it was okay, let's forget about that. And then there was talk about them doing a marathon in October, which they then did London, but it was invite only, and because I'd never done one, I didn't get the call up for it. And then they did the Elite Cheshire one, was put on then in April 2021. So that was my first one, and as I say, I went in there really inexperienced, not really knowing what to do with nutrition sort of standpoint. I asked my mum about hers, and she didn't have gels and stuff back then, so she just drank water. And so as I say, from like 15 miles in, I just started to fall apart. Like I got a blister from 4 miles that covered the whole of my arch of my foot, and didn't manage to stay intact for the whole run, which was impressive, to be fair. And some great photos of that after the race when the blood was still pooling around in it. But 15 miles in, just started to slow off the pace. Got a stitch at 18 miles, needed a wee at 19 miles, stopped at 20 for a wee, hoping that it would also get rid of the stitch, which it did. But I literally had to crawl then the next 6 miles because my legs had just seized up while I had to stop. Going into Manchester, I obviously wanted to run a lot better than I'd done there. And I mean, I ran 2:23, so it was a great time and a great debut marathon. But I was really disappointed because the slowest I wanted to run was under 2:20, so it was a disappointment to me. But I don't know whether I answered the question there in the end, but hopefully there was enough.
So you touched on Manchester, obviously being the next kind of main run that you're looking at. What would you say your future plans are from there? Would you say Commonwealth Games, or are you aiming any higher? Yeah,
so I mean, I've always said, when Kipchoge sort of said, no humans limited sort of thing, it completely resonated with me, because I've always been, you've got to dream at the top. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff where, like the whole carbon plate race shoes and things like that, and people say, well, it's like cheating, the performances are better and things like that. But then I look at like the top British marathon runners, and we've got some amazing guys, Johnny and stuff like that. Callum Hawkins, fantastic. But at the same time, like, we're still running only the times that like the best British runners were running back in like the 80s and stuff like that. So Jeff Smith, I see him at Croxteth quite a bit and stuff like when he's back over from America. Won Boston. He's a fantastic runner. 209s, 208, stuff like that. A lot of the other guys, Steve Jones, who coaches a lad who I train with, Nathan Jones, runs for Wales. So he was the British record holder until Mo Farah broke it the other year, or a couple of years ago now. But so the times aren't there, and a lot of the times I follow a lot of the American sort of running scene, and watch their YouTube videos and listen to the podcasts and stuff like that. And again, a lot of the marathon runners all talk about like 2:10 being this barrier that we need to break, and I'm like, well, yeah, it's a nice barrier to break, but it's also a nowhere barrier in the grand scheme of like where marathon running is now. Like Kipchoge and a lot of the Kenyans and Ethiopians knock out 201s, 202s, any given day at a marathon. And I feel like by saying 2:10 is the barrier we need to break, sort of stops us at that, because if we're only aiming for 2:10, then if we're not having the best of days and stuff like that, you just drop off a little bit, and you end up being like, well, I wasn't feeling great and I ran 2:11, 2:12, I'll take it, sort of thing. Whereas I feel like if the barrier was 2:05s or whatever, then you're going to finish at 2:11, 2:12 and be really disappointed and really hungry to go back and do more. And I'm sure the guys are. I know I was hungry after 2:18. I was disappointed with that, And I say it, and like people go, well, it's a great time, and yeah, it's a great time, but at the same time, it's a nowhere time. It's you're talking 16 minutes behind the best in the world, sort of thing, and 8 minutes behind the best, like some of the best in the UK and stuff like that. I've never set limits. I always think you've got to aim for the very top. One of my heroes is Charlie Spedding, who won Olympic bronze medal back in LA in the marathon, the last British man to win an Olympic medal in the marathon. possibly the only one, I can't remember now off the top of my head, but and he talks about how he was in the pub one day and he was writing down, he had this notebook and he was listening to a conversation going on, and the guy was setting limits. They were talking about work or something on this other table across from him, and one of the guys was setting limits on what he wanted to do in work and his career and things, and the guy was being, well, you've got to aim for the top and do this, and it made Charlie think about it, and so he started writing down, and he wrote down that he wanted an Olympic medal, and that was what he wanted. And then he goes on to then running in, he wasn't the favourite at all going into LA. There was guys miles faster and things like that. And he goes into LA and he just goes, if I have the best race of my life, I can get an Olympic medal. And he goes through and he perfectly every time gets it right, the right moves, and goes through. And he finds himself finishing on the track, last 400 metres, side by side with John Tracy, running second and third. And he tries to push on to get second, and he wants the silver medal. And he sort of says how his body just sort of goes, well, you said a medal. You didn't say silver or anything like that. You said a medal, and you've got a medal because fourth's, not even in the picture sort of thing. And so he gets bronze. And he always wonders whether if he'd have said silver or he said gold, could he then have got that, and would that barrier have been there sort of thing? So yeah, I've always sort of said, my times are miles away from it at the moment, but I don't feel like I can limit myself to it. I feel like I've got to aim for the very top, which is an Olympic gold, which seems like madness and crazy. And but I feel like if I can't at least put that down as a goal, then there's no chance I'll ever achieve it. I've got to see how close I can achieve to it, and that's the real goal.
Sorry, you touched on obviously your mum being a previous Olympic marathon runner, and that you could lean on her in times when you needed advice about the sport and that. Do you think coming from such an athletic kind of background and family has improved or has given you the motivation to carry on and pursue the sport?
Yeah, I think so. So, I was, in relative terms to a lot of the guys I raced against and know and stuff like that, I was sort of quite late. I only sort of started when I was like 15. My mum and dad, obviously, my dad was a great runner, sort of county level runner and things like that, at the golden era of male British athletics sort of time. And then my mum ran in the Olympics and the world champs, and I always knew about that. And we had my mum's Olympic certificate, and I used to go in red, white and blue day in school and stuff like that, in primary school, and I'd wear my mum's Olympic tracksuit and stuff like that, and she always, because I got paint all over it one time, and she was desperately trying to wash it out and stuff like that. And so I grew up knowing that, and I always wanted to be a runner, but I was always quite lazy and just didn't want to go out and run. I just played video games. I just liked playing video games. That was that. And then I went into going into year 9 or something, and I just said to my dad, I said, I want to go down to the local running club and just train. And he was like, yeah, completely. But it was the teacher, it was my PE teachers that sort of said, look, you've got some talent, and we do, your parents are and stuff like that. Like, surely there's a little bit there, you should give it a go. And they used to always put me in the school races in year 7 and year 8, and I used to I wasn't fit and things like that, and I just run around at the back of the field and then sprint the last lap and stuff, and finish last anyway. And my dad used to go why are you sprinting the last lap? You weren't in the race to begin with. You put yourself in the race and then sprint. But yeah, so I went down to Wigan Harriers at first, because I grew up in Ashton and Makerfield in Wigan. So I think, we said it was the closest club, but to be fair, St Helens and Wigan Harriers and Lee and stuff were all pretty much in the same driving distance. But I went there, and then got to a point where there was no one really to train with apart from Jenny Meadows, but she was training at the time more at Manchester, and getting me dad to drive me to Manchester every couple of days to train and things, would be a bit mad. So we moved over to St Helens, where my coach at the time, Ray Vose, had a great athlete called Dave Forrester, who was one of the fastest in the country. He was 24th in the World Cross Country Championships when it was held up in Edinburgh. And it was one of the top juniors, broke Steve Cram's 1500 metre record for an 18-year-old. So it was a great talent and great to sort of train with and see that sort of development going on, and obviously give me something to sort of aim for as well, knowing that this lad who I train with and mates with and stuff like that is achieving those things, so it's completely possible. Always sort of wanted to achieve and wanted to do that sort of thing, and having and knowing that I went to the Olympics, stuff that gave me that thing that if my mum can do it, and I can sort of do it. There's no, there shouldn't be a barrier there, sort of thing. And she wasn't. She didn't do anything really special in training or anything like that, sort of thing. She maxed out at like 50-mile weeks, but she was more speed based. Which, to be fair, I think I am a little bit. I followed more her build than I do my dad's, who was more like stereotypical distance runner sort of imagery and what you think of like that Kenyan sort of like build, whereas I'm a little more stocky and power build, which I've got to work with for the marathon, because again, a lot of the guys I line up against in the marathon are that Kenyan sort of build, or traditional stereotypical build. So I've got to work with the power of my legs and things like that, and really utilise that, which is something I've maybe lacked in doing, because I don't do any strength and conditioning sort of work really, but it is something that I've spoke to someone from my club at St Helens Sutton, who again, he was a GB international junior, sort of when the long jump and the triple jump and stuff. So he's doing a bit of personal training now. So he's going to work with me after Manchester, because there's no point in changing things up in the current training block. Because knowing me, I'll just get injured from it. But we'll do it post Manchester, ready for the next one after that, which I'm hoping is New York. I wanted to ideally go and do New York in November. It's not a fast course, but it's an iconic sort of one, and want to
like
get
a bucket list kind.
Yeah, and it was my mum and dad's first ever marathon as well, so it's sort of got that little bit of history sort of thing that I'd quite like to go and do, and maybe roll it into a nice little trip there with the girlfriend afterwards as well.
So you've got the New York Marathon potentially on the horizon for motivation.
Yeah.
Just finally, I'm sure us three, me, Louis and Tom, were also sort of those victims of going out without running trainers in the lockdown, buying some more, not from your shop unfortunately. But what would you say to someone who sort of lacks the motivation? Just to end the podcast, what would be your sort of advice for getting up and going out every other day?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, sort of running, it's one of those equalising sort of activities in sports. Like it's solely reliant on you. Team sports and stuff like that, you can have a bad day and your teammates will carry it. In running, it's all on you. And that's, so, it is, you've got to get yourself out the door. You've got to get yourself out on the road and stuff like that. But because of that, then it's so freeing as well. And so, you can have that little bit of mental de-stress and, both obviously the physical health benefits and the mental health benefits are huge in it. And I mean, I always look at running, and I said it for my dad's eulogy, to be fair, was that running our life is like a race. It's not a race to the finish line, but it's a race to take the most beautiful route. And I think through running, you sort of get that. The people you meet along the way, the routes that you run on and things like that. Just as in life, you want to spend it with people that make you happy and doing things that make you happy and stuff, and be able to look back on it and say you did what you wanted to do in life. And I think that's the same with running. It's fantastic to win a race and things like that, but it's just fantastic just to be out there, and that's what I love about parkrun as well, is the community side of it, like just seeing everyone go out and run and enjoy the sport that I love so much is fantastic and rewarding. And I always like to sort of warm down, go in the opposite way and cheer everyone on and see them, because we're all running the same distance at the end of the day, and they're probably getting more enjoyment out of it because they're taking a little bit more time to soak in the atmosphere and everything like that. I did that at a Great North Run back in September. It wasn't going well, and I just said, about 10 miles in, just said, let's just back off and soak in the atmosphere. And I was high-fiving some of the other St Helens runners that were up there and things, and nearly tripping myself up doing a jump to high-five someone on a separate layer of bridges and things like that. But yeah, it's just, it's great fun, and there's so many wonderful people out there running and stuff. Fantastic.
Great. Well, I think we'll leave that there today. Thanks for listening to the Mersey Sport Live podcast. There's more content out on the website and the magazine. So I've been Sam Millne with Louis Ryan.
Thank you, yeah.
And Tom Routley.
Thank you.
And a big thanks to Matt Crehan for joining us, and best of luck for the rest of the year, and hopefully you recover from your injury.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Yes.